Hello and welcome to Refining Your Albrecht Dürer Sketch. My name is Eric. Today we're going to be talking about taking our rough sketch and pushing it further into the area that is ready to be starting to be inked. In the last video we sketched fairly quickly our ideas and our larger elements, and I'm now going to come in and push detail further and push proportions and visual accuracies as far as I can. Some things you will notice is that I will not be doing all of the details. Some of the details within the hatching, cross-hatching, and value development in the background, say, in the sky, in the ground plane, some of the stuff within him. I might be doing some of those things to help me see some of that line work, but some of that is not going to be as intuitive to do and then have to either erase or have to go over that twice as far as going over an ink. So as I go, you'll see I'll be focusing more on the larger details. I will be getting much more detail than I am at this point, but I'm not going to be doing every single bit of value. All right, here we go. Okay, so not a perfect drawing, but I have enough detail to start inking. Notice that I still have a lot of marks that I have not added. I probably should add a little bit more at the base of the chair here. But other than that, most of this internal stuff I'm going to try and tackle for the first time in ink. There's pros and cons of pushing your graphite sketch further. Pushing it further is obviously going to give you more security as you go forward. A lot of people want to just trace the lines, sort of a mindless action, spend most of the trial and error in graphite. That's fine. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time, but depending on how you're approaching it, it could give you more visual accuracy and a better drawing overall. I'm going to trust my ink application and know that even if I make small mistakes, there's ways of covering that up. And as I start adding ink to this drawing, I'm once again going to be doing the larger areas first, and then erasing areas of graphite, and then adding that detail as I go. To start out, I'm going to be using microns. These are the 05s, which is like a 0.45 millimeter, something like that. Kind of like a medium-sized point for them. What I like to do with a new pen or anything is always give it a test. The other thing is when we get to it, a lot of the line work is going to be visually different. If you imagine my line is this thick, some people are going to want to come in and count how many lines are above this. There's 5 lines, and there's 8 lines here, then there's 10 lines here, then there's 7 lines here. That's not necessarily going to work unless you were to have the same line weight sort of proportionally to your size of drawing. So I'm looking more for visual density. I'm absolutely not counting how many I see. Somewhere in here I'm going to try and get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas of grass, but not necessarily, however many it is tall. I think it's a little bit too specific, and as we said, is not necessarily going to be accurate visually. Okay, so once again, once your graphite sketch is to a point that you feel fairly comfortable to start into, I would start in on ink. Remember that you can go back and forth. Once you start ink, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are only on ink. I'm going to start some ink, then I'm going to come back and work a little bit on the base of the chair with graphite, then I'm going to push ink. Obviously inking the areas that I am sure of first. That will always be a really good way of pushing the drawing forward and helping me stay on track to finish these drawings in a decent amount of time. Okay, here we go on ink. Okay, so that was my first pass in ink. As you can see, there's still some large areas that I have not dealt with. But the main important thing is that I have the larger structures planned. You may have noticed a couple things while watching the video, or the time-lapse. One was that I was erasing as I went. Once you get an area that you are satisfied with ink, try to erase that graphite so you can see what the ink is actually looking like, and you can start adding detail. You'll notice that I've come in with some mark making more densely in some areas. I think I'm going to use a larger Sharpie for this area, as it's all of a dark value. You may have noticed I also used a variety of different pens. A 1, a 0.8, this would be a 0.5. So, you know, the larger the number, the larger the mark. In your first pass, you will get a lot of marks that are all the same value, weight, the same line weight. That's okay in the early stages, but as you continue to push these drawings, you're going to want to find areas in the drawing that have thicker line weights and develop that line weight as you go through. So, as a first pass on my ink, not bad. But I still have a lot of work to do as far as adding mark making and value structure throughout. You'll see that I came in some areas and I didn't do it all the way through, such as the area of the sky that I've come in with these horizontals. I'll continue to add lines in there. I'm not too worried about that. There were some imperfections as well. There's some things that I didn't do 100% perfectly, but that's okay. I'm not really worried about that. I think that once this drawing is finished, there's going to be enough detail all the way around that minor details, minor imperfections are going to be very difficult to see. That's sort of the idea. We overload with detail to have successful drawings. And all I'm doing now is once again taking an eraser and erasing stray marks as I go around. I like to go back and forth. You'll notice I didn't really tackle the face or some of these details yet. I really want to make sure everything is sort of building into those more important areas. So when I actually get those prepared, the areas around them are basically finished. I know how line quality and line weight will be looked at and how it will be feeling in comparison to the rest of the composition. So continue to develop with graphite and then with ink. And in the next video, we'll see me finishing this drawing with ink once again, pushing this further, mostly focusing on proportions, but also line weight throughout the composition.